The Ides of March, 44 BC. A day forever stained by ambition and the cold glint of daggers. Julius Caesar, Rome's unstoppable dictator, lay dead at the foot of Pompey's statue. Chaos erupted across the Forum. The city reeled from the audacity of the assassination, a seismic shock that threatened to tear the very republic apart. Led by Marcus Brutus and Julius Cassius, the conspirators believed they had freed Rome from tyranny. They envisioned a return to senatorial rule, cleansed of monarchical ambition. Yet, their noble ideals blindfolded them to a brutal truth. Caesar's ghost would prove far more powerful than his living presence. From the immediate ashes of Caesar's pyre, a terrifying new power consolidated. Mark Antony and the young Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, vowed merciless retribution. These two formidable figures, alongside Lepidus, forged the Second Triumvirate, a brutal alliance bent on hunting down every last conspirator. What followed was not merely another civil war, but a titanic struggle for the soul of Rome. The stakes were unprecedented, the outcome uncertain. Brutus and Cassius, now self-proclaimed Liberators of the Republic, fled Rome, raising vast armies in the east, preparing for the inevitable clash. They believed their cause was just, that history was on their side. But the Triumvirate's legions, fueled by vengeance, were a storm-gathering force. How could such an expansive and ideologically driven conspiracy, led by men of such stature, ultimately be overcome? This is the story of Philippi, where the Republic made its last, desperate stand, and where Caesar's shadow finally consumed his betrayers. The shockwaves from Caesar's assassination ripped through Rome, leaving a gaping wound in the heart of the Republic. The conspirators, hailed as liberators by some, found themselves adrift in a volatile political sea. Their initial hope for a swift return to Republican normalcy was a grave miscalculation, as historical records reveal. The Roman populace, still reeling, quickly turned its grief into rage. Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted lieutenant, seized this critical moment with unparalleled political acumen. He masterfully orchestrated Caesar's funeral, a spectacle of public emotion. Antony's eulogy, a rhetorical masterpiece, painted the conspirators as treacherous villains. His words ignited a furious mob, driving fear into the hearts of Brutus and Cassius. The so-called Liberators, once standing tall in the Senate, now faced a terrifying reality. The people they sought to free yearned for vengeance, not renewed liberty. Brutus, the stoic idealist, attempted to appeal to reason, but the tide of public sentiment was overwhelming. His vision of a restored republic crumbled before his eyes. Cassius, the more pragmatic and cynical, recognized the immediate danger. Their position in Rome had become utterly untenable. Under threat of violence, Brutus and Cassius were forced to flee the capital, abandoning the seat of power they had hoped to reclaim. This exile marked a pivotal turning point. Their flight plunged Rome deeper into a dangerous power vacuum. The Senate, weakened and indecisive, struggled to assert any meaningful authority. Then, from the shadows, emerged a new, unexpected force: Gaius Octavius, Caesar's adopted son and heir. A mere 19-year-old, he was initially dismissed by many. Yet, Octavian possessed an uncanny political shrewdness, inherited perhaps from his adoptive father. He immediately claimed his inheritance and loyalty of Caesar's veteran legions. This move thrust him into direct contention with Mark Antony, who had initially sought to monopolize Caesar's legacy and power base. The two titans clashed. Expert analysis confirms their early relationship was a complex dance of rivalry and necessity. Both vied for control, yet both faced a common enemy in the conspirators. Another formidable figure, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, a powerful general and former master of the horse, also entered this dangerous political equation. Recognizing the immense threat posed by Brutus and Cassius, And driven by personal ambition, these three men began to negotiate a pact of unprecedented power. What emerged from these dark dealings was the Second Triumvirate: Octavian, Antony, and Liberators. Unlike its predecessor, this was a legally sanctioned dictatorship. Granted extraordinary powers by the Lex Titia, they were officially designated triumvirs for the restoration of the Republic. The irony was stark and brutal. Their immediate and most chilling act was the implementation of prescriptions, a systematic purge of their political opponents and anyone deemed a threat. Historical records detail the horrors: lists of condemned citizens publicly posted, properties confiscated, lives brutally extinguished, often for mere political expediency. This calculated terror served two chilling purposes: eliminating rivals and, crucially, amassing the immense wealth required to fund the colossal war ahead. The ideological battle lines were now irrevocably drawn. On one side, the triumvirs, consolidating autocratic power under the guise of restoring order. On the other, Brutus and Cassius, now raising armies in the east, striving to uphold the fading dream of the Roman Republic. Their cause was a desperate gamble. They rallied senators, governors, and legions loyal to the Republican ideal, believing Rome could still be saved from what they perceived as monarchical tyranny. The schism was not merely political, it was a fundamental clash of philosophies, a brutal test of what Rome truly represented. Freedom or stability under a strong hand? Each side believed implicitly in the righteousness of their cause. The triumvirs saw the conspirators as regicides, destroyers of legitimate authority. Brutus and Cassius viewed the triumvirs as opportunistic despots, completing Caesar's tyrannical trajectory and extinguishing the Republic forever. With the wealth of Rome and the loyalty of its legions, the triumvirate began to consolidate their forces, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. From the ashes of Caesar's funeral pyre, a new, far deadlier civil war had ignited. All roads now led to a brutal, decisive showdown. The stage was set, not just for a battle, but for the very soul of Rome to be forged in the crucible of conflict. Philippi awaited. The shadow of Caesar's assassination had barely lifted when the avenging triumvirate, composed of Octavian, Antony, and Liberators, galvanized into action. Their resolve was ironclad, their objective singular: hunt down Brutus and Cassius. From Italy, a monumental undertaking began. Octavian and Antony, pooling their legions and resources, prepared for an invasion of the East. This was no mere skirmish. It was the largest Roman mobilization in decades, perhaps ever. Historical records suggest an army numbering upwards of 100,000 men. Moving such a colossal force across the ancient world presented a logistical nightmare of epic proportions, testing the limits of Roman military engineering. Their primary route involved a daring sea crossing of the Adriatic, a feat vulnerable to storms and enemy interception, showcasing their unwavering determination. The triumvirate understood that any delay would allow the Liberators to consolidate power, transforming a rebellion into a formidable Eastern empire. Speed was paramount. Meanwhile, Brutus and Cassius, having fled west, were far from idle. They too were busy forging their own powerful alliance in the eastern provinces. Cassius, operating with brutal efficiency, quickly secured Syria, raising numerous legions and vast sums of money from its rich client states. Brutus, in turn, consolidated control over Macedonia and parts of Asia Minor, drawing on local loyalties and levying additional troops. Their challenge was uniting these geographically dispersed forces, forming a cohesive army capable of facing the triumvirate's imminent onslaught. A crucial war council was convened in Smyrna, a dramatic meeting where the fate of Rome hung precariously in the balance. Here, they debated their grand strategy. Should they entrench themselves in the east, or meet the triumvirate on European soil? The decision was audacious. They would cross into Thrace, then Macedonia, to confront the Avengers near the city of Philippi. This move was a colossal gamble, abandoning the secure bases of the East for a direct high-stakes confrontation. The Liberators' march was itself an immense logistical feat, traversing vast distances, their supplies stretched thin across hostile terrain. Both monumental armies were now inexorably on a collision course, drawn towards a single, decisive battleground. It was a tragic spectacle unfolding across the ancient world. Legions of Rome marching against legions of Rome, brother against brother. The Triumvirate's advance, spearheaded by Antony, was relentless, driven by a thirst for vengeance and the urgent need to re-establish stability. Octavian, despite his youth, displayed a keen strategic mind, meticulously planning the lines of supply and troop movements. Antony's tactical genius, forged in Caesar's Gallic campaigns, provided the necessary military experience to guide their vast forces. Their initial strategy was to prevent the junction of Brutus and Cassius's armies, hoping to defeat them piecemeal. However, the Liberators, against significant odds, successfully linked up, a critical strategic victory before the first arrow was loosed. They chose their ground with masterful precision, establishing a formidable defensive position on the plains west of Philippi in Macedonia. The terrain was naturally advantageous. A narrow plain flanked by impassable marshlands to the south and steep hills to the north. This natural bottleneck would funnel any attacking force, minimizing the Triumvirate's numerical superiority and cavalry advantage. Immediately, the Liberators began fortifying their camps, constructing elaborate earthworks, trenches, and palisades, demonstrating their foresight. Cassius, the more experienced and pragmatic general, is widely believed to have orchestrated this defensive masterpiece, understanding the vital need for protection. His camp anchored the eastern flank, strategically positioned to command the crucial Egnatian Way, controlling access through the plain. Brutus's camp lay to the west, providing mutual support and securing the other flank, creating an almost impregnable combined position. When the Triumvirate's vanguards finally arrived, they were confronted with an unyielding bulwark, a testament to Roman engineering and resolve. Octavian and Antony quickly established their own camps on the opposing western plain, facing the Liberators, completing the deadly tableau. The stage was now perfectly set. Two colossal Roman armies, each representing a different vision for Rome's future, stood eyeball to eyeball. The air around Philippi crackled with an almost unbearable tension, as both sides braced for the inevitable, cataclysmic clash that would decide Rome's destiny. The vast plains of Philippi, autumn of 42 BC, became the crucible where Rome's fate would be forged. Two monumental armies, each embodying a different vision for the Republic, stood poised. On one side, the Caesarian avengers, Octavian and Mark Antony, commanding an overwhelming force of 19 legions, battle-hardened and loyal. Against them, the Liberators, Brutus and Cassius, leading 17 legions, many levied hastily, yet driven by the powerful ideology of restoring senatorial liberty. The first engagement commenced, a brutal test of wills and martial prowess. Unexpectedly, the battle ignited with Antony launching a bold, swift strike against Cassius's right wing. Simultaneously, Brutus, seizing the initiative, drove his legions forward with ferocity against Octavian's left flank, aiming directly for the young heir's encampment. The air was rent with the clash of steel on shield, the guttural roars of legionaries, and the desperate cries of men fighting for their lives and their ideals. This was Roman against Roman, a horrifying spectacle of internal conflict, where former comrades now stood as mortal enemies in the dust and blood. The discipline of the legions, honed over centuries, was on full display. Shield walls met, pala flew, and gladius blades found their mark with grim efficiency. Every thrust, every parry, every step forward or backward was dictated by years of rigorous training, a testament to the unparalleled might of the Roman soldier. Yet, beneath the stoic Roman discipline lay the psychological horror of kinsmen slaughtering kinsmen, a profound tragedy echoing through the ranks. Brutus's attack proved devastatingly effective. His veteran legions, inspired by his personal leadership, tore through Octavian's less experienced formations. They breached the fortifications of Octavian's camp with shocking speed, overwhelming the defenders in a torrent of steel and determined will. Octavian himself, weakened by illness, narrowly escaped capture, carried from his tent just moments before Brutus's men stormed through. His encampment, a symbol of Caesarian power, was ruthlessly plundered and sacked, its precious stores and standards captured by the Liberators. Meanwhile, on the opposite flank, Cassius's situation was dire. Antony, a seasoned general, pressed his attack with relentless, brutal force. Antony's legions, veterans of many campaigns with Caesar, were unwavering, systematically dismantling Cassius's formations with disciplined aggression. The pressure on Cassius's right wing was immense, a tidal wave of armored bodies and sharp blades threatening to engulf his entire position. Antony's forces broke through Cassius's outer defenses, pushing relentlessly towards the core of his camp, which became a desperate scene of hand-to-hand combat. Despite fierce resistance from his besieged troops, Cassius's lines began to buckle under the sustained assault, showing signs of imminent collapse. The tide of battle turned decisively against Cassius, his command crumbling as Antony's legions pressed their advantage with unyielding momentum. From his elevated position, Cassius observed the distant triumph of Brutus, but gravely misinterpreted the chaos engulfing his own flank. Believing Brutus's distant success to be a defeat and his own position utterly lost, a profound despair seized the weary general. In a moment of tragic desperation, Cassius ordered his loyal freedman, Pindarus, to take his life, preferring death to capture or disgrace. With grim resolve, Pindarus carried out the order, and Cassius, one of Caesar's assassins, fell upon the bloody fields of Philippi. Cruelly, the news of Brutus's victory on the other flank arrived just moments after Cassius's fateful decision. A bitter irony of war. The first battle concluded in a brutal stalemate, each side claiming partial victory, having seized portions of the enemy's encampment. Antony secured Cassius's camp, while Brutus celebrated his capture of Octavian's, a Pyrrhic exchange soaked in Roman blood. Brutus, upon learning of his co-commander's death, was utterly heartbroken, the joy of his own triumph overshadowed by profound grief and a sense of impending doom. Though the Liberators had gained ground, the loss of Cassius was a crippling blow, shifting the psychological advantage irrevocably towards the Caesarian forces. For the next 3 weeks, a tense standoff ensued, with both armies digging in, consolidating their positions, and grappling with fluctuating morale. Octavian, despite his initial setback, recovered his health and began to meticulously rebuild his forces. His resolve hardened by the near defeat. Brutus, though tactically successful, now carried the heavy burden of Cassius's loss, struggling to maintain the fighting spirit of his remaining legions. The stage was now tragically set for the second decisive encounter at Philippi, where the fate of the Roman Republic would finally be sealed. As the dust settled on the plain of Philippi, a chilling silence descended, heavier than any previous clamor of battle. The sun, once witness to the clash of titans, now illuminated a landscape littered with shattered shields and broken dreams. For Brutus, the defeat was absolute, the finality of their lost cause undeniable. Escaping the immediate slaughter, he knew his fate was sealed, the last vestiges of Republican hope extinguished. Under the watchful gaze of the moon, he chose a stoic's end, embracing death on his own terms. Falling upon his sword, Brutus joined Cassius in the annals of tragic heroes. Cassius, only weeks prior, had made the same desperate choice after the first engagement, unable to bear the weight of perceived defeat. Both men, by their own hands, brought their grand rebellion to a definitive close. Their suicides, far more than mere personal tragedies, became a stark symbol. They marked the agonizing death throes of a Roman republic that had stood for nearly five centuries. With the Liberators gone, the last formidable obstacle to the Triumvirate's unbridled ambition vanished. The cause for which they died, the ideal of a free republic, was crushed beneath the boots of triumphal legions. For Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus, Philippi was not merely a victory. It was an affirmation of their absolute power, a license for brutal consolidation. Their grip on Rome became ironclad. Antony, surprisingly, showed a fleeting respect for Brutus, ordering his body honorably cremated. It was a rare human gesture amidst the savagery of civil war. Octavian, however, demonstrated a colder, more calculating temperament. His actions post-Philippi set the precedent for the ruthless consolidation of power that would define his future reign. The immediate aftermath saw an intensification of purges across the Roman world. Those suspected of Republican sympathies faced swift and merciless retribution. The infamous proscriptions were reactivated, lists of enemies published, offering bounties for their heads. It was a reign of terror designed to eliminate all potential dissent. Thousands perished in this brutal culling, senators, equestrians, and prominent citizens who had dared to oppose the triumvirs. A generation was decimated, its intellectual and political backbone shattered. Rome's ancient institutions, already weakened by years of civil strife, were now mere shells. Power resided not in law or tradition, but in the hands of the victorious warlords. Philippi was undeniably the crucible. It irrevocably altered Rome's trajectory, hammering the final nails into the coffin of the Republic, accelerating its inevitable demise. The battle signified that the era of senatorial decrees and popular assemblies was truly over. Personal loyalty to powerful generals, not allegiance to the state, now dictated destiny. For Octavian, Philippi was a monumental triumph. It validated his nascent military leadership and set him firmly on the path towards singular, undisputed authority. It was here that the foundations of his future empire were laid, a blueprint for absolute rule drawn in the blood and sacrifice of countless Romans. Though Antony shared in the victory, Philippi also subtly shifted the balance of power. It positioned Octavian strategically for the eventual ultimate confrontation with his fellow triumvir. From the ashes of the Republic at Philippi, the seeds of the Roman Empire were sown. The battle provided the political vacuum necessary for its birth. Octavian, the young and previously unproven heir, emerged from Philippi as a formidable power broker, destined to become Augustus, the first emperor. Thus, Philippi stands as one of history's most pivotal battles. It permanently altered the course of Western civilization, replacing an old order with a new imperial dawn. The echoes of that defeat, of those tragic suicides, still resonate. They serve as a bloody testament to destiny's unforgiving hand and the relentless march of power. Philippi stands as a chilling testament to the unavoidable price of betrayal, a stark warning against ambition unchecked by loyalty, forever scarring Rome's history. The moral ambiguities of Brutus and Cassius, caught between ideals and fatal miscalculations, remind us of history's often grayscale nature. Their tragic end underscores ambition's perilous cost. This monumental clash also cemented the military genius of Octavian and Antony, whose strategic acumen and tactical mastery crushed the Republican dream. Philippi was more than a battle. It was the crucible where the fate of Rome, and indeed, the future of the Western world, was irrevocably forged. The fields of Philippi definitively ended the Roman Republic, ushering in the long transformative age of the empire under a single, unchallenged authority. We hope this epic journey has deepened your appreciation for Philippi's profound significance, a pivotal turning point etched forever in human civilization. What do you believe were the greatest strategic blunders at Philippi? Share your insights below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic histories.